And now, broadcasting on Star Worldwide Networks, it's In the Green Room. Green is in, but what does that really mean for you? Join the gang for a fun and energetic half-glass, half-full perspective to what and how sustainability is the lifestyle for the future. It can really affect everything you do, from your health, wallet, environment, money, even your morals. So our goal, to help save the planet one show at a time. Now, welcome to the Green Room.
Welcome everyone to In the Green Room. I'm Kinga.
And I'm Chet. I hope everybody's having a great day today.
Absolutely. Stoked to be here.
Doc?
Absolutely. Love the show.
All right. Well, we have two heroes here at the show. Will Fischbach and Terri Fischbach.
Well, Terri Rodzevik, actually. She kept
thank
her
you.
maiden name. So, good evening, everybody. Will Fischbach. I'm an attorney here in Phoenix at the law firm of Tiffany & Bosco, where I'm a partner, and I practice in the areas of civil and commercial litigation.
Hi, I'm Terri Rodzevik. I am a nurse practitioner. I am an officer in the Public Health Service, and I work for NIH and Indian Health.
And they're both heroes because they're both veterans. And we all need to say thank you for your service right off the bat. We very appreciate it here in the Green Room.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Veterans that serve like you are the reasons why we can have a show like this here.
Absolutely. And congrats for being on the cover of Attorney in Law.
Attorney in Law
publication.
A good looking cover.
Thank you very much.
Great article, and giving us the chance to get to know you better and put some of that into words.
It's a privilege to be here. Thank you.
So, Will, you were born in Los Angeles and Terri in Virginia, so you're from opposite sides of the country, and we appreciate some of the cultural differences that exist from east to west. And Will, you're a third-generation military family member?
Yeah, that's right. My grandfather, William M. Fischbach, was an officer in the Navy, the Naval Medical Corps during World War II and the Korean War. My father, William M. Fischbach Jr., was a counterintelligence officer. He was commissioned in 1962, and he served in counterintelligence here at home during the Vietnam War. And then I was commissioned as an Army officer in 2000.
And before you joined the military, you entered the military with a law degree and an MBA, both from Tulane University in Louisiana.
Yeah, that's correct. I did my undergrad here at Arizona State. And,
Go Devils.
Yeah, go Devils. And I wanted something a little different for grad school, and you really can't get much different than New Orleans, Louisiana.
Love it. Love it.
Chet, have you been to New Orleans?
Oh, yes. I don't remember a whole lot of it, but I remember Bourbon Street was a good time. But yeah, I'm sure that was a fun place to go to grad school, even though you were busy, I'm sure.
You know, of course, I studied copiously and all
Drank
that, all
even
that
more
good stuff.
copiously.
But New Orleans is just it's a wonderful city. It's a wonderful piece of kind of American culture. And if you haven't gone there, please visit. It doesn't have to be during Mardi Gras or anything like that, but just to take in the architecture and the culture is really an experience.
And the food.
And the food.
So
It was
straight
amazing.
from law school, you went to serve for our country.
I did.
Tell us about that.
Well, I knew that the U.S. Army JAG Corps, JAG stands for Judge Advocate General, and there's really only one Judge Advocate General in the Army, but it's the acronym is JAG, and I knew it was a great way to get trial experience, and that's what I really wanted as a lawyer, was to get trial experience. And initially I only wanted to go in for about 3 or 4 years, and that was the plan. And then
3 or 4 years, and
yeah.
you ended up 9 years?
Yeah, so a couple of jokers flew some planes into the World Trade Center and wound up extending that stay considerably.
What was that like for you to be in service during 9/11?
You know, my boss at the time, Colonel David Hayden, he came to us. It was a Tuesday, I remember, because I was driving back from physical training when I heard about it, and it almost sounded like a private plane, like a Cessna had crashed into the towers. And but later we saw that wasn't the case, and we saw the towers come down. And my boss, Colonel David Hayden, gathered all of us together and said, "Life as we knew it is over," and he was right. I mean, there's so many things post 9/11 that never went back to the way they were. And just kind of an easy example is, many of us can think of the time when we could go greet a family member as they were coming off the plane at the airport. I mean, that's never going to happen again. And there's just so many little things like that just never went back to the way they were.
So Chet and I were on the Trade Center the day before 9/11. Chet, do you want to tell us a couple memories of that?
I mean, I was only 5 years old, so I barely remember it, but I do remember is just the state of shock that our country was in afterwards. School was postponed for a few weeks or something crazy like that. So I remember what it was like to just be like in a state of emergency. And like Will was saying, life has just been different since then, and flying especially.
We drove back. We drove back cross country, and we just
All the airports were closed for a few weeks,
and we had
months
purchased
or
a puppy.
something.
So I tried to make it fun for the kids, even though that was going on. So, but then of course we turned on the TV here and there. But we made it back. So it was just a really crazy time.
It was a jarring experience for everybody, to say the least. And at the time I was serving the 18th Airborne Corps as the assistant operational law attorney, meaning my focus was things like the law of war and rules of engagement. And I went home that day and I started packing my things because I knew a deployment was on the horizon.
And where was the first place you went?
Initially, I went to Uzbekistan. So oddly enough, my boss, because I was the assistant operational law attorney, the chief operational law attorney, went before me in the first wave and got a little sideways with some folks there and was told to go home. And they said,
"Wait, you got sideways, or who did?"
No, my boss did at the time. He went over there and got a little sideways with some folks. And I was told after that, Fischbach, get your gear and get packing, because you're going over to replace your boss, who was basically fired from the position at the time.
How did you feel about that, taking your boss's spot?
I was actually really excited to go there, because it was, it was an opportunity to do something new and exciting, and frankly, an opportunity to do what I had trained to do, which is, serve as an attorney in the armed forces. So the place was K2 Uzbekistan, and it's called K2 because it's named after an air base outside of Karshi-Khanabad, Uzbekistan. And we actually fought the war from K2 probably the first 5 months or so of the war initially. And the reason being is that K2, the military, there's a saying in the military that, amateurs talk tactics, experts talk logistics. The U.S. military is as powerful as it is because of its logistical might. If you don't have fuel, food, ammunition to supply your troops, you don't have anything. And what K2 offered was a logistical hub. It had a railhead, it had an airfield where you could push supplies down into Afghanistan.
So K2 was the base, and that's where you were working as a defense attorney or a prosecutor?
I really wasn't either. I was just kind of attached. I was kind of the command advisor. And that could be things like criminal conduct. It could be something we got a lot was what I would call fiscal law questions. Congress is very persnickety about the money that they appropriate and how it's spent. And it's quite literally a criminal offense to spend money in a way that's contrary to congressional intent. And there would be a lot of administrative law questions I would have to deal with if, let's say, an Uzbekistani or Afghani government official gave an officer a very expensive gift, gave them a piece of jewelry worth $1,000. That creates certain complications under administrative law. So you're kind of like a general counsel, a jack of all trades in that respect to the chain of command.
You're a paratrooper with jump status.
Yeah, I was. So,
But wait, what was it called? The
Screaming Eagles one
Yes.
time,
Well,
82nd Airborne, then the 101 Screaming
Screaming
Eagles
Eagles.
later.
So when my first duty assignment in the Army was in the Republic of Korea, in Seoul, Korea.
Okay.
That was 2000 to 2001. And South Korea is a wonderful country. Living in Seoul was great. It's kind of like living in New York City, except there's a lot more neon and everybody speaks Korean. But other than that, it was a really incredible experience. And then after that, I was sent to 18th Airborne Corps, and en route, I went to airborne training at Fort Benning, Georgia, which is 3 weeks. And people say to me, well, why did you, as the lawyer, need to be a paratrooper? And the reason is that it's not uncommon for the JAGs to go in and jump in with the rest of the troops, during what's called a mass tactical airborne operation. The former staff judge advocate of the 82nd Airborne Division, who jumped into Panama in 1989, would always tell a story that he was on the ground 5 minutes before he got his first legal question, which was, here we are, the U.S. Army 82nd Airborne Division takes this airfield in Panama, and there's a bunch of helicopters there, a bunch of Huey helicopters that belong to the Panamanian Army. Mm-hmm. And the question was, hey, can we take those helicopters? Can we use them? And the answer was, yes, you can, but under the laws of war, you have to remove any markings of the Panamanian Army and put a U.S. marking on there so that it doesn't appear as though you're a member of the Panamanian forces, that you're clearly stating, I'm a member of the U.S. Armed Forces.
So my first concept of a military attorney was A Few Good Men with Tom Cruise taking down Jack Nicholson. Yeah. And that was impressive, and I don't remember Tom Cruise jumping out of airplanes, so this is even more impressive. But you had some very interesting assignments. And can you talk about, I think, being a brigade prosecutor in Iraq and your special role there working with the Iraqis?
Sure. So after the 18th Airborne Corps and my time in Uzbekistan, which also included time in Afghanistan, because I would bounce back quite a bit between the two, I went to the 101st Airborne Division at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, where I started as a brigade prosecutor and then worked my way up to be the prosecutor for the entire division. The 101st got sent back to Iraq in, I think, October of 2005. One of my jobs there was to work with the Iraqi police and the Iraqi judges to prosecute violent terrorist cases in the Iraqi justice system. And that proved to be a unique challenge because the Iraqi judges, for the most part, were Shia Muslim. The Iraqi police, for the most part, were Sunni Muslim. And there was just kind of a long history of animosity between those two sects of the Muslim faith. But ultimately, what it boiled down to was a lot of meetings, a lot of drinking chai, which is tea, or smoking apple cinnamon tobacco out of a hookah pipe to get both sides talking.
How bad was your headache after that? I've tried to hit those before. It's rough.
Yeah, it was. It wasn't so much that, so much as sometimes the food would leave you with a serious case of bubble gut. Is all I'll say. But eventually they got talking, and that was one of my jobs. The other job I had as being the chief prosecutor of the division was to supervise the criminal prosecutions going forward. And that, Doc, is exactly what you're talking about there. Good old Tom Cruise and A Few Good Men, and Colonel Jessup and the Code Red. Those are, the military justice system it's like the civilian justice system. There are judges, there are juries, there are rules of evidence. And that was my task as the chief prosecutor, was to manage those prosecutions, and eventually two very high-profile war crimes prosecutions really landed in my lap because I was the guy there at the time.
What would you feel was the most dangerous time in the whole serving over there?
In asymmetrical warfare, meaning kind of a counterinsurgency type environment, there isn't much of a front line. And to be clear, I wasn't going around kicking down doors or rounding up high-value targets or anything like that. But one morning I was in my called a CHU, a containerized housing unit, which is almost like a cargo container with a door on it. And I could hear what sounded like to be incoming mortar rounds. And I could hear that they were getting closer. And I kind of, I wrestled my roommate up and said, "Dude, we need to go to the bunker now." And here we were just in our living area, in the cantonment area, and there's mortar rounds, landing, really, Doc, almost as close as you are to me. Wow. And that's kind of the nature of asymmetrical warfare. You could be, going to the bathroom and a rocket could land danger close to you. And if you're traveling anywhere, there is always the danger of improvised explosive devices, IEDs, or things like that. So, to say there was a front line in those conflicts isn't quite accurate. And I don't want to at all I want to make it clear that the infantry soldiers and the special forces soldiers going on those dangerous missions are a level above, to be clear. But that young soldier that was stringing Cat 6 cable in the battalion headquarters, he or she at times faced risk too.
Right, and that was Mosul, Iraq, I think, where you had the mortar attack on yourself.
That was in Mosul, Iraq, in one of Saddam's old palaces up there. We called it the Eagle Palace because it had a big eagle on it, which, in the 101st, that was very fitting.
These names are so familiar from CNN. I mean, we've heard all the politicians talking about Mosul and how we're going to solve Mosul, and to think you were there getting bombed is really surreal. And, with the dangers and the risks, we talked about the angel flights. I was wondering if you could tell us about those ceremonies. And
I want to turn it over to my wife, Terri, who can talk about her role in Iraq and then get on to the angel flights.
And we want to hear about how you guys met. That's always my favorite part. I love
the love story.
The love story. The love story is number one to me.
She's a romantic.
Tell us. Yeah, I am.
So I will admit that was probably one of my favorite parts of being out there was meeting Will. I was a trauma nurse in the 47th Cache. So we receive patients right off the battlefield, and a lot of times we would put them on a helicopter, and I would fly them to a larger hospital so they could be taken to, Germany or Kuwait. And
so Terri, where did you meet?
So we met in Tikrit, and Will was prosecuting a case.
Is that Iraq?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that was Saddam's hometown.
Okay.
Cobb Spiker, and Will was pressing a case where two privates decided that they were going to drive a Humvee drunk through the desert. They had a little too much fun at hip hop night. They flipped the Humvee over and they became my patients. And because there was alcohol involved and they got a little mouthy to my hospital commander, Will showed up the next day and asked some questions about it. And Will was very assertive. He wanted me to know that he was the 101st chief prosecutor, pay attention to me. And I,
wow.
It took me a minute.
So was it love at first sight?
I was interested, and I was also a little cautious.
I love it. And then what happened? Don't spare us any details. We want to hear the whole story.
Goodness. Well, Iraq is, obviously a battle zone, so our options are very limited. But we found ways to have fun. So eventually we met up because I was in different hospitals. Will was in different bases. We were doing our jobs, and there were some missed opportunities. And finally we met up probably a month after we first met. And he asked me out for coffee. So,
your first date was coffee?
Yes. And it was like in another chew. So basically like a back of a pickup.
So it wasn't some frilly coffee shop here in Scottsdale.
Oh gosh, no. It was like
you really were able to focus on each other's personalities that way. Not the decor.
There was absolutely nothing involved other than ourselves.
Yeah.
And
I love it. And you weren't allowed to drink?
No.
You couldn't go have a glass of wine?
Nope.
Okay.
Coffee.
Okay. Okay.
And so we...
Are we allowed to talk about the mouthwash?
Sure.
Okay, we may have drank some mouthwash.
We had heard that if you drank enough mouthwash, you could get a buzz. I will say there is some truth to that rumor, especially if you haven't consumed alcohol for several months prior.
I think the buzz was actually from the toxicity of the chemicals in the mouthwash. But our so soldiers were very crafty out there. Everyone was trying to find a way to find release. And I noticed that some people were, drinking mouthwash. They were doing things that you normally wouldn't do stateside. And I thought I'd try it.
To be clear, kids, do not drink the mouthwash. Do not drink the mouthwash.
Scope is the good
End
stuff.
of story.
No,
It was not a good idea.
But the medical is so fascinating to me. And you were in those really high risk, high trauma situations,
Yes.
high risk, life and death, people straight off the battlefield, generals standing in the corner watching what's happening to their soldiers.
Yes, and actually, our first meeting was after a trauma. So Will and I finally have the opportunity to meet up 6:00, and a helicopter comes in 5:45. And we have to take care of the patient. And the patient is an Iraqi insurgent. And this case is like very special to me because it shows the integrity and the valor of the American soldier willing to put themselves out there. So a bad guy is lost enough blood in fighting us that in turn they had to donate American blood to replenish our supply after we gave it all to the insurgent.
So he's bleeding to death, and you guys save him, even though he's basically the enemy.
Yes, and then we had to give him our own blood, and also more.
So Americans were donating their own blood. Okay.
Yes, and I think that's incredible.
It is incredible.
And the spirit on the basis that this is something people want to do.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Well, because once the blood supply is gone, it needs to come from somewhere. So, and you never know, like Will was saying, when the next mortar is going to hit. So you want to have that supply available for anybody who would need it, to include the bad guy.
So you gave the blood to the bad guy, and maybe the Americans would need it.
Yes.
So then what
soldier.
happened?
Okay. So we did that, and I go out and I see Will, and I'm covered in blood. And so the guy, he was actually, we named him Lefty because his whole right arm was shot off by a machine gun from an Apache helicopter. So right after we saved Lefty, I see Will, and he's like, "What the heck happened to you?"
Because you're covered in blood.
Yes. But the sweetest thing is he offered me his fuzzy jacket and took me out for coffee. And yeah, it was actually a good night after that.
So that was that the second date?
That was the first date. Yeah,
That was the first date.
First time we met was after a big trauma, and yeah.
That's so beautiful.
Thank you.
So then what happened? How did you guys collect blood for the rest of the Americans in your supply?
Yeah, really just through donations. And again, it goes to I think what is so important serving in the armed services, particularly the U.S. Armed Forces, is maintaining that moral high ground. And many soldiers came forward to donate blood. Once the supplies ran low and once Lefty needed even more blood, people stepped to donate. And I'm a little partial here, but again, I don't know that you would get that same reaction from, say, the Russian army or the Chinese army. At least I'm gonna venture a guess to that effect.
Yeah, that's
America.
So important for us to have in mind.
So while you were courting, did you have any big cases you were trying? Anything memorable that you would like to talk about?
Well, yes, but you asked about other dates and
Yes.
So I had to come up with excuses to keep going back to the hospital. So I think Terri, you can. What was the next time I came back? What was my excuse then?
He had an unsightly mole on his forearm. I had to take it off. But he realized it also required him to take off his shirt. So, yes, he comes in and I remove his mole and I sew it up, and he has a scar. It's actually in the shape of a heart on his left forearm.
Oh, really? Do we get to see it? We still
Little souvenir.
Aw.
I think it might be pretty well healed by now.
Wow, that's so special.
It's a scene straight out of MASH or ER. You can't beat reality, right?
He's looking for other moles on his body. Like, what can she remove?
So I know there's something about an ice truck.
Yeah. So when you're kind of dating over there, as you were saying, there's not a whole lot to do. You're not going out to restaurants or to concerts or anything like that. So I think one of our biggest finds is we figured out where the ice was stored. And, by that time it was summertime and it's like 120 degrees out there. And we found this secret truck in kind of in a very obscure part of the base where it was just, mounds and mounds of ice. And you want to talk about just air conditioning in a time of need. It was, I can't tell you what a great find that was.
So
Wow.
exciting. So exciting. So during that time, you are also prosecuting cases. Are you guys both jumping out of planes? What's going on?
Weren't jumping out of planes. Terri was definitely saving lives over there. Both a friend and enemy and people in between. For my part, we did have two very high-profile war crimes cases, and they're kind of colloquially referred to as the Iron Triangle murders and then the Mamadia Massacre. The Iron Triangle murders occurred during a helicopter assault on an island in Iraq. And I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive, but there's a very big lake in Iraq called Lake Tharthar. It's kind of about the size of Lake Pontchartrain in New Orleans.
Okay.
So it's about 20 miles by 30 miles, and there was a canal attached to it, and there was an island in that canal that supposedly had a lot of bad guys in it. And there was a helicopter assault launched to round up the bad guys. What was, I think, noteworthy about the operation is that it was carried out by a unit called the 3rd Brigade Combat Team of the 101st Airborne Division, also known as the 187 Infantry Regiment, also known as the Rakkasans. A very storied unit in the 101st with a lot of just wonderful history behind it. The brigade commander at the time was somebody named Colonel Michael Steele. And the name might not mean much to you right off the bat, but if you've ever read the book Black Hawk Down, or if you've seen the movie Black Hawk Down,
Great movie.
Captain Michael Steele was the Ranger Company commander during the Battle of Mogadishu. And he was just a highly decorated Army soldier, and really just kind of like for many of us, just a real life rock star, for lack of a better term. Here he was, this incredible decorated soldier that had been through one of the worst incidents in recent memory that we'd seen on the big screen. And to see him in person was kind of electrifying because Steele, he was a big guy. He played football at the University of Georgia, so he was like 6'6", 260 pounds. He was a big man, and he was quite literally larger than life. And he had allegedly, and to be fair, Colonel Steele denied this, but he had allegedly given rules of engagement for the assault: kill every military-aged male on the island. Which, again, a quick poll. Somebody give me a definition of a military-aged male.
18 and up.
Yeah.
Doc?
It could be any
Able
age.
to kill you, 14, 12.
It could be any age.
Is it a 12-year-old boy? Is it a 12-year-old girl? I mean, what if they've got a loaded AK-47, in arm's distance? Are they then military-aged males?
All right.
Are they holding it? Do they then become a military-aged male? It was a very, assuming the command was given, and again, to be fair, Colonel Steele always denied it, but it was a very ambiguous command. But during the operation, a couple of insurgents were, well, I shouldn't even say that, suspected insurgents were rounded up during this assault. They were zip-tied. I mean, the plastic ties were put on their hands.
Amazing.
And then some soldiers decided that they would cut their zip ties, shoot them, and then concoct a story that they were, quote, shot while trying to escape. And they were 3 detainees were murdered in that incident.
How was it discovered?
The way a lot of this stuff is discovered in the military is soldiers talk, and they talk, and they talk. A lot of this just kind of eventually kind of seeps out because, people, I think that's the way with most violent crimes. It doesn't have to be in Iraq or even in the military. I think the way, unless you get a suspect to confess directly, I think the way a lot of this thing is discovered by any kind of law enforcement apparatus is look, people talk about what they do. And that's how you oftentimes kind of zero in on the bad actor.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're trying these cases. Where are you when you're trying these cases?
We did the initial investigation and the initial hearing, which is kind of like a grand jury hearing, but the defense attorney gets to show up and cross-examine people. We did that one in Iraq. And that one was notable because one of the soldiers was defended at the time by a very prominent New York defense attorney, a gentleman by the name of Paul Bergeron, who was just amazing to watch in terms of his craft as an attorney. It was just spellbinding in a way. He was subsequently indicted for running a prostitution ring and then later for murder. And now he himself is incarcerated. But just watching him do his thing was, it was really incredible.
Wow.
So I know there was another case, I don't know how to pronounce it, Mamadia Massacre. How do you say that?
Yeah, Mamadia Massacre, which is, it's actually a technical error because the crime actually occurred in Lusafia, Iraq, but the AP story originally reported it as Mahmoudiya, Iraq. So Mamadia Massacre is what stuck.
So it's technically not accurate, but the press had already written the story, so that's
right.
That's
and so the name stuck.
So if you could tell us a little bit about that, and were you and Terri already together when you were prosecuting with that case?
We were, and by that time the Iron Triangle case was going. My boss called me into not really her office, but I think she sent me an email and called me, or sent me an email over the classified email system, and what she said to me, I had a hard time believing it first, and she said it looks like some U.S. Army soldiers raped a 14-year-old Iraqi girl, killed her 9-year-old sister, killed her 2 parents, and then set the body on fire to make it look like it was the act of some kind of violent sectarian assault. And when I first heard that, I just thought that's bonkers.
You didn't believe it.
I wouldn't say I didn't believe it, because I think by that time I'd been in Iraq long enough to realize that the reality of combat is surreality. So I wouldn't say I didn't believe it, but I was I was kind of aghast. And then when I saw the pictures, it just kind of, those are still kind of burned into my head till this day.
That is so horrific. I hope, did you win the case?
So the ringleader was a soldier named Private Green. Private Green was definitely a misanthrope. He was somebody that had gotten into the Army on what's called a moral waiver. And that was a time when let's face it, the Army probably needed bodies for the active conflicts in both Afghanistan and Iraq. And Green probably should never have been in the Army. But Green was the one that pulled the trigger. And kind of going back to your last question, how was this discovered? The rape and the killings occurred, I want to say, in March of 2006. They weren't discovered until June of 2006. In that intervening period, Green was discharged from the Army for having an antisocial personality disorder. Go figure. Oh. And because he had done that wasn't. He had a history of doing just bizarre things. He had thrown a puppy off a roof at one point, and he was just somebody that really did not need to be wearing the uniform. And so by the time we finally kind of got our arms around the facts of the case and who was who and what was what, Green had a discharge. He literally had an honorable discharge because he had a psychiatric disorder, and he was out of the Army. So he was out of the jurisdictional grasp of the Army. But the Congress had, fortunately, and recently passed a new law called the MIJA, the Military Extraterritorial Judicial Act, that applied to people who commit crimes abroad while in the armed forces. They're no longer in the armed forces, and whatever they did would have been a crime under the United States Code otherwise. And so Green was one of the first big test cases of the MIJA. He was prosecuted in the Western District of Kentucky by the U.S. Attorney there, and I assisted in that prosecution. My job was to prosecute everybody else. So there were 4 other soldiers involved in the incident who either participated in raping the victim, covering it up, assisting Grain in killing the family, and under basic kind of concepts of accomplice liability. If you help the trigger man, you're equally culpable. You're just as guilty of murder. So we got convictions in all those cases, and Green was eventually convicted himself as well. The U.S. attorney went for the death penalty. They didn't get it. I can't say I was surprised by that. I think Green put on a very compelling case that that unit had been through hell. And I remember sitting in the grand jury proceedings, and I can't talk about the testimony, obviously, because that's maintained under grand jury secrecy, but I could see the faces of the grand jurors as they were hearing about the conditions in Iraq and what this particular unit had gone through. And I knew at that time, I was like, there's no way they're going to get the death penalty on this. And for those of you who are looking for a good book, I think, on the Iraq War, counterinsurgency in general, in this particular case, there's a wonderful book called Black Hearts. That's probably, I think, the best book out there about the Iraq War, and it talks about this particular case and what that unit went through. It was, God, I hope I get it right, but I believe it was Bravo Company, and I can't remember which battalion in the 502nd Infantry Regiment. And that unit really went through hell. They lost a lot of soldiers in a lot of horrific incidents. And unfortunately, it was a kind of a culmination of a very violent tour for that unit. At the time, the squad leader was on leave, and the soldiers had gotten a hold of some alcohol, and kind of it metamorphosized, I think, into a horrific crime. That had you removed any one of those elements, had the squad leader been there, had they not had alcohol, I don't think it would have happened.
So Green and all the rest of the killers, did they get life?
Green was sentenced to a life sentence. He actually committed suicide, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago. He was at the federal penitentiary here, I think down in Tucson or Florence or something like that. But he hung himself in his cell. The other soldiers got sentences ranging from 20 years to 110 years. And I think some of them are and most of them are still in Leavenworth, but I admittedly haven't kept tabs on all of them.
Yeah, the contrast is interesting. How you, in one setting, you have the entire base donating blood to save a single insurgent, and then in another setting, you have a few bad actors that really are doing horrific things and kind of make the whole system look bad.
Yeah, and they were certainly they were the exceptions, and not the rule. That's for sure. But there was a time when I met with that particular family. They were from the Al Janabi tribe, and there were 2 surviving members of the family.
The family.
Right. There were two young boys, the 2 younger brothers, who were actually at school when all this was going down, and they had come home to find their house on fire, and their parents and their sisters murdered. And at one point I met with them, and I said to them, I'm going to do everything in my power to see that your family has justice, but I can only imagine probably how hollow that felt from their perspective, because from their point of view, I was wearing the same uniform of the people that had killed their family, and really I can't fault them for feeling that way.
Right. And the horrors those soldiers experience. I mean, working in the VA system here back stateside, we are so treading so lightly for PTSD. You assume basically everyone has PTSD, and you're doing everything you can not to trigger those memories and have people psychologically decompensate. And that's for the rest of these soldiers' lives. So it's just amazing to me how anyone can be expected to hold it together in that environment. And the rest of the country, the burden of responsibility we have to these soldiers when they are back stateside to really support them.
Yeah.
So we are so excited that you guys are here in the studio. You guys are heroes. I've been telling people all day, I'm like, oh, these amazing war heroes are here at the show and they're in love, and I want to hear about how Will proposed and how you guys got married. I want to hear something happy.
Yes, so do I.
I want to hear something happy right now.
All right, something happy. So, right before I went back to Iraq the second time, I was visiting Will in Arizona. We went to Sedona, and he was living in Cottonwood at the time. And
was he practicing already at Tiffany and Bosco?
No, he was practicing at a law firm in Cottonwood.
Okay.
And I was training in Colorado, getting ready to deploy back to Iraq for the second time. Will was already out of the Army.
So you're going back.
Mm-hmm.
He's out. And how long have you guys been apart for a while?
A few months, because we were together in DC. He decided he was going to live in Arizona, which is quite a contrast from DC. And I was in Colorado getting ready to leave back to another desert. So here I was in Sedona. It was Thanksgiving weekend, actually. So it was like a pretty big weekend right before we flew out. And I was kind of like, okay, you have to make a decision. Like, is this like, are we going to be together forever? Or am I going to...
Did you say this or did he say this?
Nobody said this. This was just implied.
Okay.
Yes, like this was completely unspoken, but I just felt that this was the time where either he was going to do something or who knows what's going to happen when you go to Iraq, because all these life-changing events occur. And a year is a long time, especially when you don't have all the technology and everything to reach the people back at home. And it's an 8-hour time difference. So it's pretty much just like a year of absence.
And there's all those men out there, because you said it's like, what, 10% women?
Yes, it's called Princess for a Year. You go out there and you basically, if you're female, you can do quite well. So all these thoughts were running through my head and thinking, what's he going to be doing? Because he's living, in comparison, the life of luxury now in the Sedona area. And I am out there.
And how long at this time had you been together?
So that was in 2008 or 2008. And we had met in January of 2006. So about 2 years.
Okay, together 2 years, and you're about to leave for a year.
Yeah.
And what happens?
So we go hiking, and I'm like, oh, of course, this is what's going to happen, because we're hikers, and it's totally fitting. We go out in Sedona, and I'm like ready for it. We climb to the top of this peak, and I think, I'm tired. I'm just like, okay, this is it. I'm ready. And nothing happens.
Yeah. Cathedral Rock for anybody who wants to visualize it.
Yes. And I'm bummed because I have to walk all the way back down, like the walk of shame back down the hill. Like, okay, I'm still single. I'm still going to Iraq. But later that day, you can tell the rest.
I planned to propose at the Enchantment Resort, which I don't mind giving a plug for. It's a wonderful resort there in Sedona. And I'd gotten a table on the patio, and I'd done the timing just right, so it was going to be at sunset, and it rained. So that scuttled that plan right there. They put us inside, and they put us next to Terri said it was Thanksgiving, so a lot of families in the area. There was a table, 2 tables, German family. We were next to the kids' table. So there were 7 kids yelling in German as I'm, trying to.
That's a romantic environment.
Very, what they say about German. And I'm a Fischbach, so I'm a German. So it's not quite the most. It's not quite the language of love, if you know what I mean. So. Those were the conditions under which. So
you're getting nervous, and you're about to propose, or did you propose right there at the table, or did you wait?
I did at the table.
Oh, okay. Amazing. And you instantly started crying, or what happened?
I said, yes, I accept your offer. I'm just kidding. No, I don't think there were any tears, but it was, yes, it was a very happy moment. And I actually had 2 rings. Our friend made me a real diamond ring. And then I had what they called the stunt double, which was, a not diamond, and I was supposed to take that with me to Iraq, but I couldn't bear to wear it, so I took both with me to Iraq.
So
you
what
got
was that like
engaged.
to be? Oh, wait, I was going to say, what was
go
it
ahead.
like to be newlyweds and then to live apart for a year? That's like that's the opposite lifestyle from most not newlyweds, but newly engaged couple. I misspoke.
It was challenging, but I think it was we made it work, and we talked on the phone. We traded emails. I would send her care packages whenever I could with little things that she couldn't get over there. But it worked out.
I'm laughing because one time I got someone else's care package by mistake. Because I guess he mailed it out of it must have been a post office in a military base, and all the standardized military packages went out, and they must have gotten swapped. And I always got weird things like cake mix and coffee and things that I could share with other people. And I got this box, and it had a can of cherries, some baby wipes, and I think like goldfish crackers. I was like, thanks. So it clearly swapped.
So tell us about your extreme fitness. This is something we need to know, is that you're both Ironmen, multiple competitions. Terri, you podium most events. You've done
Wow.
Both have done Kona, Hawaii twice. You've been a world champion twice. Tell us about the
Very
extreme fitness
impressive.
regimen and how that contributes to your professional lives now, being at that level of fitness.
I think it helps my professional life because it keeps me disciplined, and it keeps my my focus on priorities, and I'm very schedule oriented, task oriented. So knowing that I have to wake up and get a workout in before I even have to go to work and get these things accomplished.
So what time are we waking up to run? What?
So this morning, I think I woke Will up probably around 4 a.m. as I was getting up to ride my bike for an hour and a half.
So you run, bike, swim? Mm-hmm. Okay. And how do you do alternate days or?
Yes, I have a coach, and he gives me a training plan, and I just do whatever he tells me to do.
And how many times have you won at Ironman?
Like overall win, I've won 4 major podium events
Wow. That's
in
incredible.
my age group.
So what are the distances with the Ironman competition? It's a 2-mile swim, 10-mile bike ride. I forget what the breakdown
yes,
is.
I wish there were only a 10-mile bike ride.
Or wait, 10-mile run. Oh yeah.
Or even a 10-mile ride.
But yeah, for those of us that aren't that level,
That sounds delightful.
Yeah, that actually would be fun.
That's like what I did this morning. And so an Ironman event is a 2.4-mile swim, immediately followed by 112-mile bike ride, and
112. Okay.
and then a marathon. So a 26.2
Oh my
mile
gosh.
run.
That's insane.
And Will, how does this help you in the courtroom?
I think Terri said it very well. It helps you in terms of your discipline, and I think for any professional, having a regular exercise regimen just kind of helps flush a lot of the stress out. I think the people that work for me will tell you that if I haven't been exercising, they can probably tell, because I'm probably a little more moody and a little more ornery. So, I think, look, you don't have to do, an Ironman is a very extreme fitness event, obviously. But I think for anybody that's a professional, having a regular fitness regimen and a good, sensible diet is going to help you in what you do.
And here now, as a civilian, you're still doing trial law. You're still in the courtroom.
Correct.
And that's high stress from start to finish, because new evidence is pouring in. The case is evolving rapidly. You're responding to every little thing that comes up.
I often say to clients, civil law and civil litigation, it's like a chess game. There's only a handful of ways it can start, but once it gets going, the possibilities are endless. Now, I like trial work. I like litigation. I like the chess game. And not all lawyers feel that way, I think, but I'm very fortunate and very blessed to have found a profession that I enjoy so thoroughly.
Seems like you thrive under that pressure then.
Oh, it's the best. I was fortunate enough to try a jury trial, which I won in Tucson in February before the lockdown hit, and I'm just kind of so glad I kind of got that out of my system that I got one before we went into lockdown mode.
And comparing to the military, which is better?
They both have their pluses and minuses. I think in the military you're only trying criminal cases, and there's only so many of those you're going to see. Homicide, drugs, sex crimes, and maybe property, larceny, that kind of thing. With civil litigation, and particularly with my practice, it can be anything and everything, and that variety is another thing that I thrive on. Is I never know what the next client or the next case is going to bring, but I am absolutely confident in the ability of my team, to rise to the challenge.
One question I have, we didn't get to cover it because we kind of been moving quickly, but what extra challenges did you face as a prosecutor prosecuting those war crimes where the evidence wouldn't be, collected in a systematic way like how crimes are here? Like, I'm sure the evidence in both of those cases was very squirrely. So what kind of extra challenges did you face with, a shortage of evidence?
It's a great question. So, for example, if you go to a crime scene in Iraq, and actually when I think back to both of those cases, when I went to the crime scene for the Iron Triangle murders, I went with, I took a Pathfinder squad and 2 Blackhawks. I had an Apache gunship giving close air support overhead because that was what you might call a bad neighborhood in Iraq, just outside of Samarra. And normally you think about, I'm gonna drive to the property if it's a civil property dispute, or drive to the crime scene if it's somewhere here in South Phoenix. But going to the scene of the crime took on a whole new meaning there in Iraq. And then also just getting information from witnesses. I mean, you have to work through an interpreter, which has its own challenges, because you're never not quite sure that what you're saying to the interpreter is really being filtered correctly. Mm-hmm. And likewise, you're not really ever quite sure if it's being filtered back correctly.
So those barriers of communication definitely would make it more difficult.
And in the remaining 2 minutes, you are chairman of the board of Goodwill for Arizona, in addition to your busy law practice.
I am. I'm the chairman of the board for Goodwill of Central and Northern Arizona. It's my view about Arizona and why I chose to come to Arizona, or rather come back to Arizona after getting out of the Army, is that I think this is a state, and Phoenix in particular is an area where it doesn't matter what your last name is, doesn't matter where you went to school, doesn't matter who you share your bed with. If you're willing to put in the time and the effort and be a leader in the community, you can be just that. My perspective was I'm no longer wearing the uniform, but I think I still have an obligation to serve my community. So,
you've lived a life of service and a servant leader. You got the example from your parents. Did we mention that?
Very, very much so. Both my parents were attorneys, and both were very, active. My father was very active in politics. In addition to being a lawyer, my mother the same way. So I had some great examples to follow.
I'd love to see both of you run for office. You guys are such heroes, and we're here saving the planet
one show at a time.
And I feel like I'm so fortunate to have this friendship we've started, because everything about you guys is heroes and service and Goodwill. You care about sustainability. Tell us a little bit about the Goodwill.
So Goodwill of Central and Northern Arizona, we have, it's just about all of Arizona except for Tucson. We also have a small territory in Maryland. We're about 100 thrift retail stores, about 4,500 employees. And from a sustainability perspective, I mean, we keep hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds of things out of landfills in any given year. And then the money that's generated from that thrift retail operation at Goodwill the mission is to end poverty through the power of work. So it's job training, job placement, helping folks learn to build a resume, how to use the most recent version of Microsoft Office, that kind of thing, because I am personally a very big believer that probably one of the most profound ways you can either create or restore a person's sense of personal dignity is through the power of work and employment.
Well, we'd love to get Tim O'Neill, the CEO, back on the show again. He's been on numerous times, and I know he's just a wonderful man.
Tim is the CEO and president of Goodwill, and he's just done a phenomenal job. And it's really wonderful to have had a partnership with him these many years.
We'd love to have you on together very soon. Thank you so much, Will and Terri. You are true heroes.
It was a privilege and a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for having us on.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you for listening to In the Green Room. Join us here live every Tuesday at 6 p.m. or anytime on demand 24/7 on StarWorldWideNetworks.com.